Hi everybody, this is Jim Tolles, and today I wanted to talk to you about the ego and spiritual awakening. Part of what makes the spiritual awakening so shocking, so jarring, is because we're having that old unconscious ego that we've been living in shaken to pieces. And one of the ways that I kind of group together a lot of my blog posts is under the term surviving the awakening. But what is really trying to survive? It's the ego. So it's a little bit of hyperbole on my part, and I'm just kind of having fun with it because that's how it feels. You're just like, oh my gosh, my whole world is crumbling. What do I do? And more often than not, the answer is to do nothing. To be with what is happening, to watch this old facade crumble away because it is not you. Now, the bigger problems that people get into is where they're still so committed to how they've been thinking, how they've been acting, to all the people and relationships they have in their life, all the things they have. There's still so much commitment, that old inner programming, even after the big awakening, that they keep latching back on, trying to grab it, trying to pull it back into their life, and God keeps snatching it away. And it's not just God, it's you. The inner you is also like, as one hand reaches, the other hand's pulling the other hand back, and so you're in this tug of war with yourself. And it's shocking. But what's more interesting is that you've always been in this tug of war with yourself. This is why we self-sabotage so often. It's because we have this inner pull towards doing something or realizing something. And then we have all this fear or these upset feelings and angers and other emotions that immediately get in the way and say, no, I can't have that, or I can't be that. It won't make money. That's the common excuse, which is really a survival excuse. The thing is, like, if I don't make money, I'm not going to be able to survive. I'm going to end up dying on the streets. And that's kind of how the ego thinks. It's very dramatic, and it only knows what it knows. Right? That's the real one of the big problems with the unconscious ego. The unconscious ego, and I want to be clear about what I'm talking about, because ego is getting used a lot, and everybody kind of has their own different meaning. And what I mean by ego is it's a collection of personality traits and experiences in our particular lens into this world. And as this old unconscious ego, and the unconscious part is that it doesn't know that it's not real. It thinks it's real. It thinks it's the whole of the universe. And it thinks the whole universe should respond to how it acts. And so this makes it incredibly uncomfortable in this world, because if I'm in that space and you're in that space and everybody else is in that space, we're constantly trying to make each other interact in a way that fits with our story. Right? Because the ego is just a big story. We don't remember half of the things that happen in our lives. There's so many different events, emotions, and things that go on. But what we do through the ego lens is we pick out particular ones and we create our little story out of the vastness of our whole experience. Because I'm sure most of you don't remember everything that's ever happened to you in your life. And there's a lot of things. And in the past, what would happen when an experience would happen that didn't fit into the ego structures, you usually ignore it, or you write it off, you say that's just not normal. You do all these different things so it doesn't interfere with your story about you. But in awakening, you're seeing all the lies that story is and all the limitations that that story offers you. And that's really what it is. It's just a box that you fit in, and it's dissolving. But also, being in this box has created certain relationships and situations in your life based off of these lies. If you don't believe in yourself, you've probably been attracting lots of people who don't believe in themselves. And that can be kind of an interesting thing, because a lot of times you'll find out that people with all these really big egos who look like they're doing important things in the world actually don't believe in themselves at all. They've just been doing what they thought they should do because they thought they'd get social approval. They thought they'd get money doing it. They thought they'd be safe in some sort of way. And that's what social approval and money kind of are. It's another form of safety, right? Because you don't want to be alone, right? And if you're alone, you're not safe. And that's kind of one of those messages that runs around in a lot of people's minds. And in many ways, the spiritual awakening takes people into intense times of being alone by themselves, because they have to look at themselves and they have to figure out who they are now. And this is an important transition, because I'm not anti-ego. I'm not going to tell you that the ego is bad. The ego, to me, once it's conscious of itself, is just another tool. It's just another hammer. It's a particular lens and a way of looking at the world. It's a particular set of personality traits. Some of the personality traits you have in the unconscious state do go away because they are acting out from core lies. So if somebody's really sarcastic, that can go away because it's actually very mean-spirited. It's usually putting other people down, and that won't feel good in the awakened state. So a personality trait like that will go away, but a sense of humor will stay. So the sense of humor would be underneath the sarcasm, right? So it's that joy and that silliness, that joie de vivre. I feel like using a French word today. It's still there. If you've always had a great sense of humor, it'll still be there, but the sarcasm part will go away because you don't need to make fun of other people. And if you make fun of anybody, it's usually yourself, but it's in a very different way, right? It's not mean-spirited. It's not meant to be overly critical. It's often to simply laugh at your own folly, because you can start to see that now. It becomes much clearer. A lot of things become clearer, right? So in that way, another way to look at the metaphor, the unconscious ego is like an ego where your face is covered in mud and you can't see anything, but you think you can, and that's the problem. It's one of those phases that people go through where they start out thinking that they can see just fine, not realizing that they can't. And then you go to a phase where you suddenly realize you can't see anything at all. And you're really humbled. And then you move more into a phase where you're cleaning away the mud and you start to see things. And that can be shocking. And that's another way I can use the metaphor of awakening, where you're starting to see clearly for the first time in your life. And a lot of times people see a lot of pain in their life, and that's really upsetting. All right, so that's more that sense of that having to survive the awakening. It's like, oh my gosh, what do I do with all this mess? And usually it starts by just being aware of it. Action will happen. Conscious action will happen. Most situations aren't extreme enough that you have to immediately react, but if you do, you'll know the more you drop into this awareness. And so as things are crumbling away, as that old ego is crumbling away, a new comes into being, and that's the spiritual ego. And this is very different than the ego that thinks it's spiritual. Okay, the spiritual ego is founded on the understanding that we don't know everything, we'll never know everything, and we're here to be of service. We're here to be in the space of love. And this particular lens is just a temporary thing anyway, and that too will fall away, because there are gradations of subtle awareness that will happen. So the spiritual ego that you'll come into, you'll learn about it, you'll be able to laugh at it when it doesn't work, and you won't hold on to this in that rigidity or in this very rigid way. The ego that thinks is spiritual is the one that's running around going to India, finding gurus, wearing spiritual type clothing, whatever that happens to be, and doing all these different things, right? It's still externally focused. It's trying to get these new reference points to wrap itself around and say, aha, I'm spiritual now, I'm safe. You know, life can't get me. Many of these people become light workers, you know, so they're out there trying to do good, but they're trying to do good to make themselves feel better and to feel like they're good. And it's often continued avoidance of the deeper issues, and that's where awakening really takes you. So in the emergence of the spiritual ego, it's really kind of when you start to clear away all the debris inside you, there's now space for you to naturally grow, and to grow into the person that you want to be, and to grow into the role and the story that you want to play in this life. The spiritual ego is just another set of clothing. You know, it can still be taken off. It's still not truly you, but it also is truly you, right? It becomes part of that paradox where all is accepted, all is sacred. We're not trying to scrub ourselves out to some sort of ideal of perfection, which is a real problem for a lot of people. They're trying to get to some higher and higher self-realized point, and you know, if that's where you're called, that's fine, but there's no trying to this. There's simply that allowing, that acceptance. And the more you come into that allowing, that acceptance, the easier the crumbling of the old unconscious ego is, because you're simply allowing something to happen that has been trying to happen your whole life. It's taken all your energy to keep rebuilding this facade, to keep being whoever it is you are, even if you don't like the story. In some way, you've been committed to it, because at any moment you can change it. And that is the true power of living in this life. And that's something anyone can do, regardless of if you're on awakening or not. At any given point, you can change your life. So these are some thoughts that I want to share about the ego and what's going on in this process of spiritual awakening. Of course, as always, the process is what happens after the awakening. The awakening happens, you start to see what's real, and then the process is like, how do I live in this space on a daily basis? So I hope this is helpful. Once again, my name is Jim Tolles, and you can find out what I'm talking about all the time at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Thanks and have a beautiful day.